Hey there, we're live, and I'm here with Bill All today. Welcome, Bill.
Hi, how you doing, Douglas?
Good, good. It's always fun to hang out with you and chat, Bill. And gosh, it's been a minute since we caught up, and you're doing some really cool stuff there up in the Northwest with some local food policy.
Hmm.
And it sounds pretty exciting.
Yeah, yeah. It's Spokane, the area that I live in Eastern Washington, is very agriculturally based historically. Although in Spokane itself, we've moved rapidly into other areas, but there's a strong farm sector here. But at the same time, the how to feed people and how to keep a local agriculture system that produces for the local scene has lagged behind, say, the east side or the west side of the mountains, Seattle, Portland, down to San Francisco, and people have been hard at work trying to begin to see the food system as a whole. So I've had the
Mm.
pleasure of working with the Food Policy Council a bit at the end of its process to come up with an action plan to present to our local government people. And I've just learned how people have been in the trenches, and but they've been sort of relying on one-to-one relationships and not seeing themselves as a whole system. So part of the work of the Food Policy Council now is to help do that. And so in our public meetings, we got a chance to visit with people from the food banks and food pantries, with people who are involved in food waste issues, as well as farmers and consumers. So it's really great to recognize that people have a common interest in strengthening our local food economy and food system. So that
Yeah,
was really great.
that's really awesome. I love this notion of kind of investing in local supply chains, and I
Hmm.
think food is probably one of the most important local supply chains.
Yeah, yeah, it's the one that's in the lead, and it's really hard to do even with local production, because if you start to think about all of the pieces, the national and international markets impact prices, impact the ability to get supplies that are needed, and even small to mid-level farmers are linked to the global food chain, and we're trying to figure out ways to really support them to sell locally and for the public to begin to understand, or to continue to understand. Some of them already do, the importance of buying from our local farmers and providing markets for that. So anyway,
And
I'm learning a
so,
lot.
is that what you mean by kind of recognizing their part in the system or looking at the system as a whole? Is kind of how things are connected to the global supply chain, or are there other components to this kind of more kind of systems view?
Well, it starts, I mean, again, it's just like anything. You pick up the rug, and you'll, have the whole thing in your hand wherever you pick it up. Or if you look under the rug, you'll see the dust there. It starts with education. At the youngest ages, people are, what's food? Oh, it comes in a plastic container and it's got lots of sugar and this and that and the other thing. And from advertising and from even from the way school lunch programs have been structured. And and the idea that you might grow your own food or be close to a farmer is um, less and less a part of people's upbringing, right? So I grew up in New York City and then moved to upstate New York, so I had the advantage of moving from city to close to the farmlands, and my mother was really interested, after being an urban gal for most of her life, to start growing tomatoes or whatever. And so from an early age, I got that experience. But a lot of my um, friends' children and grandchildren don't have that experience, even if they live close to the countryside. So education's a big part of it. Um, it's really hard for farmers, as you know, to make a living selling their stuff directly or even indirectly, but for sure directly. That it's hard to justify the prices you need to if you're a small farmer. Need to charge if you're a small farmer. Um, the and it goes all the way up to the CARES Act right now. In the beginning of the pandemic, there was a lot of money that was pushed onto the local ag scene to sell directly to through either through the farmers markets or through other programs that would get food in the hands of people who needed it because they didn't have jobs and they don't have jobs. And it was very successful. Lots of food got pushed out that way. But then the big players, the distributors and the big farm agriculture, realized there was a lot of money to be made. So they actually, I'll use the word manipulated the system to push more money towards these contracts with big producers or with places that are large farm distributor companies. And that's where the money went. And all of a sudden, the local food supply chain the money was literally yanked out within a matter of weeks, not because of failure, but because of political and power interests. So you have this whole system that's like kind of stacked against local ag. And one of the challenges for our community is to recognize that we have to maybe figure out ways to pay more for food that we could get cheaper at the regular supermarkets or the big chain supermarkets. There's a few chains locally, 5, 10, 15 stores that are committed to the local food system. And lastly, I know of at least one major distributor who showed up at this meeting. We were really impressed that they showed up, who has a 20% commitment to local food. In other words, they're aiming aspirationally across their national and global system to have 20% bought locally, which is at least a start. So it's not like it's the big evil empire, but there are market forces that drive towards larger and larger concentration of wealth and power in the food business, like everywhere. So the challenge, and then we see all the advertisements, and from when I was a kid, frozen food and canned food was the way to go for vegetables and so on, and processed food, and chopping up the food for us and putting it in little boxes and shipping it from Minneapolis to Seattle as a little home food kit that we can, which are all interesting ideas, but it pushes away from local foods. So how to get everybody in the question space of like what will really serve everybody here, and that's again some of the complexities that we were talking about in that space.
Yeah,
it's not like local good, global bad, but it's the balance is really shifted towards sucking resources away from communities in so many ways.
There's multiple levels of complexity here as well, because we also talked about the complexity of just bringing the constituents together, the stakeholders, and you've got the supplier that has certain needs, you've got a local farmer that has certain needs, I'm sure you had politicians that have needs, you had concerned citizens, I'm sure, people that are passionate about just participating, and so how do you invite them in a way that they all feel heard and that we can move in a common direction together, and then simultaneously you have this goal that you're trying to get to, and then everyone's dealing with the emotions of life and the pandemic, et cetera. And so how do you balance all those things? And
as you know, that's the $1,000 question. Well, almost every meeting I start with some basic principles, sort of having people state why they're there and eliciting the common goal from that, rather than assuming that we all know what we're there for. Having some time for people to show up as some humans, as their human selves, not as their institutional selves, but as their human selves. And then recognizing that we're not going to solve everything in one meeting or 2 meetings or even 3. So sort of like creating a sense of relaxation that we can be in the mix and hold these complexities in a deep way. As I mentioned to you earlier, one of the things I listened to in the last couple of days was Brene Brown's interview with Barack Obama. It's on Spotify, I think, from November, early November, and he was talking about, she was really interested in how could he hold such complexities, since he was a person in Brene Brown's eyes that really epitomizes this ability to hold two entirely different frames of reference in the same body mind. And he said, it came from his growing up, because he was a mixed cultural and racial background and all sorts of different ways that he realized that he was that contradiction in himself from a very early age. He said it way more eloquently than I can. But the other part that Brene was working at was, so how does that impact your leadership? And he said, well, that's one of the most important parts of being a leader, is recognizing there are limits to what you can do, that nothing's going to be perfect, that that inquiry is really important, because you can never get it perfect, but you can keep getting better. So to hold that, and in the end, you have to make a decision. And he said that's true really in public policy and public leadership in that way, but it's also true the higher up you get in a corporation or a business or a nonprofit, that when you start to look at the whole system out and the interface between your organization and the rest of the world, that complexity is there. And how do you you can't just drive an agenda for too long and survive. Right. And so that's really intriguing to me. So for me, it's not a question of what are the qualities of leadership, but how do you create spaces where we can hold that complexity and still move forwards? So, creating that kind of safety and container that I was just talking about as a starting place, but then continuing to come back to, is this the best possible solution for now? Which is a little different than, is this the best possible solution? And I think engineers have a good handle on that when they go back to their basic engineering training, which is the perfect is the enemy of the good, right? In a short way.
The other thing that kind of strikes me is, I want to come back to your comment around letting people feel comfortable with the idea that we don't have to solve it today. And there's a little bit, that's a little bit of a wicked problem too, in the sense of like paradoxical, because people want to feel progress or they'll disconnect with the work, right? If they don't feel like we're moving forward, then they'll just give up, or they'll
totally.
And so it's like a really interesting balance between like allowing people to like explore and be okay with like, the time horizon.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is decoupling, because so many people come in ready for a solution.
Yeah.
So decoupling the exploration from the solution, I think, is the first step, and then getting a handle on like what kind of time horizon are people going to be comfortable with, and let's take them on that journey rather than trying to jam something out too quickly.
Exactly. And the other thing is helping people see the gains they made in any meeting, because it's not like it has to be finished, but we did make progress. And here's the 4 things that we learned. Here's the hypothesis that we've come up with. Here's the things that we need to do next, not because it's a task list to check off, but, that's actually a measure that the moving forwards part is actually a measure of how far we've gone as well, right? We've reached a certain plateau, and now we can look to see where the next part of the journey is. So yeah, it's not about like, we're just, we're in the, sometimes it's true. Yes, we're in the mix and we're gonna have to sit with that for another couple days or a week or whatever it is. But that's also part of the beauty of thinking that a meeting is not it, it's a part of it, whatever the whole thing is. And sometimes, especially for us facilitators who are type A control, we want to make sure everything's, wrapped up in a nice, neat bow. That's our personality type sometimes. But recognizing that that's not always possible, and that it's actually possibly great to have that space to stew. Creativity happens sometimes in the places where you least expect it, as we know, whether it's in the shower or on a walk or eating your favorite food or sitting down with a pencil or drawing pad.
Absolutely.
So finding that punctuation of within meetings and over time between meetings, I think is really helpful.
Absolutely. That's, the serendipity is really so critical. And that's one of the things I've really been enjoying about Clubhouse, totally unrelated to meetings and facilitation, but I've been really just enjoying like going in and seeing random people. I just, especially in the pandemic, I miss just being able to bump into people at the local accelerator or even at the coffee shop. And so Clubhouse has been creating that for me. So that's been kind of fun. So we'll see where some of these things develop.
Yeah, I love the innovation that you folks are doing, that you are and the rest of the team, because it's not just innovation in like particular tools, but in just how we think about what it means to be online together. So that's it's heartening to me, and I see that in the facilitators responding to coronavirus. They keep evolving and changing. There's a bunch of things happening in the Netherlands that I think is really interesting to follow. I think I might have mentioned that to you a couple of months ago, but there might be some people there to invite on into this space and to check out. We can talk offline about it.
Please do. Always looking for new folks to chat with. And that does bring us to a close. We just went a little bit over our scheduled time here. So, Bill, it's been fun chatting with you. Look forward to many more.
Yeah, thanks, Douglas. This is a great way to hang out.